Hi, my name is Juan, and welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things. Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. You are a parent, and maybe your child has already a diagnosis of ADHD, or you may be thinking, I see some signs. Maybe they fit the criteria. Maybe they're a bit restless, moving around, jumping around, having a hard time staying focused, having a hard time remembering certain things. My name is Dr. Juan Santos. I'm a licensed counselor here in Greensboro, North Carolina. So if you're new to the podcast, hello, welcome. Thank you for listening. For those listening, hello again. So welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about ADHD. And in this podcast, The Couch, we focus on mental health, practical tips, practical tools, looking at how to understand it, how to approach it. And my hope is that The Couch podcast creates access, a place for you to sit on the couch and listen, whether it's listen to some of the feedback that I'm sharing here, or when a different host jump in, such as JC, counselor with Santos Counseling, listening in. So today's episode is one that many parents ask about. Is my child being a kid, right? Are they being a kid? Are they doing what kids do? Or could this be ADHD? So have you ever wondered that, whether your child's behaviors are typical childhood energy, or perhaps signs of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is what is commonly ADHD, right? So if you hear ADHD, that's me spelling it out for you there. Let's dive in. So first let's look at what ADHD is. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition, right? Meaning impacting the brain. It impacts how the brain regulates, many different items, including our attention, how the brain regulates organization, how the brain regulates impulsivity, how it regulates even activity level. And there's something I want to put in here. I think there's an important myth that we want to clear up ASAP. ADHD is not caused by bad parenting, right? I have yet to see that there's just, a parent does something bad and it, magic, ADHD is there. ADHD is another myth. It's not laziness. And please, if you're listening in and your child's really showing some of these symptoms, I think there's a lot of inflicted pain when we tell our kids, hey, you're being lazy, when in fact it's something contributed connected to ADHD. ADHD isn't simply having too much energy either, right? So energy is good, right? It helps us in many ways. Children with ADHD often know what they should do. And myself as a counselor, just a little side note, I have ADHD. You may pick up on it through the episodes. I want to share with you, I work with kids and I'll sit down with kids and the kids will tell me, they'll go, Juan, I know what I'm supposed to do. And then we talk a little bit more about it and then they tell me, they'll often point at their brain. They'll go, my brain, something's going on. So think of it this way. It isn't usually a knowledge problem. It's a performance problem. And I think there's a strong distinction there, right? It is not a knowledge problem, instead a performance one. So follow me, continue to follow me in this. You're a parent, you're concerned. There's 3 types of ADHD, right? Many people picture that one idea of ADHD, right? Which is like, maybe you're picturing a kid, they just can't sit still. They're jumping around everywhere. But ADHD, it presents in 3 really strong ways. Predominantly inattentive, that's one way. The other is predominantly hyperactive -- impulsive. And then the third way is a combined presentation. So I'll start with a combined presentation. Many children experience both that inattentive and hyperactive. So they're going to have both of these 2 brought in together. And we'll start with that inattentive one. So this is, if you're noticing predominantly that your child is leaning towards the inattentive, you're going to see things like daydreaming often, Maybe they'll lose their assignment, their homework, their classwork. They may forget when you tell them to do a task. They may forget the instructions or the order of them. They may start, whatever project you put in front of them, and then they have this really tough time finishing it. Sometimes you'll think that they're listening to you. They look like they're listening to you, but they're not. And then you'll find that you have to repeat things to them all over again. Sometimes, individual that leans in this predominantly inattentive, you may describe that person to kind of behave in a certain way that seems kind of spacey. These kids, right, these children, I think sometimes they can easily be overlooked. And I mean, overlooked, what I mean by that is the diagnosis may not come up, right? And I find that it's because often with ADHD, I think we're always looking for that high energy. Typically with inattentive, you're going to have less disruptive behaviors, which is another reason why sometimes it could be under diagnosed, just not diagnosed, not seen. So let's kind of move over to the other type. Now remember, we have 3 types. The combined one, which pulls in both of these, and I brought one up so far, which is that predominantly inattentive. And then you have the predominantly hyperactive impulsive, right? These are kids that lots of energy you're seeing, but that energy is coming out in a performance manner, such as they're constantly moving, right? Sit still, they're moving in line. Maybe they're fidgety with their hands or climbing on different things in the house. Get off the couch. Why are you on the table? Maybe you're having a conversation with your spouse and they jump in, they interrupt conversations. It could be that there's a lot of talk, right? An excessive amount of talk. And you may think to yourself, stop talking, take a little break. They could have a difficulty waiting in line, a difficulty waiting in general. And then you may see a lot of acting before thinking. Sometimes individuals in this category of hyperactive impulsive, they'll tell me, kids will say like, hey Juan, I feel like I can just go, right? So what they're referring to is that they feel like they're always on, and that's actually a describer, if you will, of individuals that lean into this category of ADHD. Now parents, you're probably thinking, let's talk about the house. Yes, let's talk about at home. So you're probably going to see some stuff at home. Here's some signs that you're going to see at home that have to do with ADHD. Getting distracted while brushing teeth, right? That's one. I remember with my daughter, that I would see often. I would say, hey, Nola, go brush your teeth. And then next thing I know, she's gone on a mission to go do 5 other things. It could be taking a really long time to get dressed. That leans a bit more towards inattentive. Or even take a shower. You may say, go do this task, like go get dressed or go take a shower. And I mean, they are just in that task for a hot minute. And then you're thinking to yourself, goodness, it should not take a person this long to do X, Y, or Z. Right? So that could lean towards that ADHD. The other here, again, we're looking at home, losing things. We talked a little bit about that. It could be losing their shoes again. They go to school and they tell you, hey, I forgot my cleats. Which I'm mentioning my kids there, or you give them a note to turn into the teacher, and then they come back after school, and then you go, how was it? Did you talk to your teacher? What? Oh, I forgot. And you may have to tell them this multiple times during the week, and it still keeps coming back that same way. Another item that you may see at home or even at school, and this is often what I think has led a lot of parents to respond strongly to seeking treatment. And it's where there's these strong emotional meltdowns. And then sometimes they're over like small frustrations. And I think the meltdown for parents, when you see it that strong, it could be a little bit scary. You're kind of thinking, okay, we got to figure out what to do. We got to put our child in the right place. So those are some, right? Those are some where parents share that we at the counseling practice, we see taking place at home with kids with ADHD. I think parents, and myself as a parent, sometimes we feel exhausted because we tell our kids with ADHD the same instructions, right? We tell them over and over. And it's important to know, and I remind myself of this with my kids, it's important to know that it's not them saying, I don't care, right? It's a working memory. The performance I shared with you, right? Like the definition of ADHD itself, right? The working memory is often effective. I wanted to touch on as well as some signs at school, because you may see these, or you could have a conversation with a teacher to see if they're seeing any of these. The teacher may notice that your child has a difficulty staying seated or in completing assignments, starting an assignment, not finishing it. Maybe they turn in something and there's like really careless mistakes. You notice they do really well with something, but then they turn in that one assignment that's a replica of another one, and it's just sloppy, and you're kind of thinking, what happened? It could be that your child at school has trouble following instructions that require multiple steps. It could be that your child at school needs more than one reminder to do a certain item. So the teacher may say, "I need you to take out your notebook and write XYZ," and your child's kind of either distracted on a thought, or inattentive, or kind of daydreaming. Um, you know, I haven't mentioned, right, in this whole episode, I haven't mentioned anything about intelligence, right? Because again, ADHD is focused on that performance part, right? Not focused on, is my child having an intellectual difficulty that is connected to like their intelligence level, and there's a distinct separation between those two. Right now, I do comprehend that if a child struggles to complete an assignment in school, that's going to impact their grade. What I'm getting at, though, is that same child likely can do very well on that test under different circumstances. And that's where ADHD evaluation, something that we do at Santos Counseling, is really important. Having those early on for kids so that they can have the right accommodations at school, right? A longer test, a distraction-free space to be able to show up effectively. For parents, and myself being a parent, I think there's some emotional signs that sometimes we can miss. So here's something I think people don't talk enough about. ADHD isn't all about attention, right? It can also affect emotions. Kids may become frustrated really fast, really quickly, right? Something that will make someone cry in 10 minutes could make someone with ADHD cry a lot sooner, a lot more easily. There could be really intense reactions, and I mean intense, like your child's upset with something, and their sibling, non-ADHD, may just kind of shut down and say, "I'm really pissed, leave me alone." And then ADHD may punch a wall, right? You're kind of going, "Wow, that's scary. That's a strong reaction." And this is not a anger issue, right? This is not an oppositional issue, right? Something is happening there with the brain and how it's responding to that emotion. Often with kids with ADHD, I'll see a struggle with criticism. I'll see low self-esteem. And after hearing things like, and this is where I want you to put yourself in your child's shoes, after hearing things like, "Hey, try harder. You're not doing enough. Focus. Pay attention. Focus. Try harder. Are you even trying? Step it up." Right? Those are really hard messages. Some kids begin believing them. They begin believing that they're the problem. And imagine how that kind of eats up at you. My hope is, as we go through this episode, and we're at the end now, there's just a lot of areas of ADHD. I wanted to give you a clean direction, give you a little bit of insight. I'll do a couple more episodes that go more into the weeds of it. To close today, if you found this episode helpful, maybe it made you wonder whether your child will benefit from an ADHD treatment, which is working with a counselor, right, on a consistent base, focused on just their day-to-day life, what they're seeing and how they're navigating it. That counselor can really step in to help them see it from that viewpoint of ADHD, so that they're able to look for ways to maneuver, ways to move forward and find success. We also work with parents, helping you as a parent navigate ADHD, whether it's if you have ADHD or your child. And then we provide evaluations for kids, for adults, so that you're able to go through some testing, and it's not really scary testing. It just brings things into attention. A lot of questions on the inattentive part we talked about, a lot of questions on the attention part we spoke on. And then that brings awareness. We're here to help. I'm hoping that you found this episode helpful. If you did, I'd love for you to share this with maybe a parent, right? Do you have a parent that's a friend of yours? There's some ADHD there. This could be helpful, right? Putting this in the right hands. Share it with a teacher. If you find that your child's showing certain behaviors and your teacher may find this helpful, share it with them. Maybe a caregiver. If we can be of help, you're in the Greensboro community or in North Carolina for remote care, our practice, Santos Counseling, is more than happy to be of help. Until next time, take care of yourself, my friend, and remember, moving your wellness forward starts with understanding.